I'm about to introduce Dean Koeller from Calvert Home Mortgages. I've got some experience with this mortgage company, this lender, and you will hear about that in the interview a little bit later on. Dean did not know that when we started this off. I've always been impressed with their organization because I've never heard anyone say anything bad about Calvert. And that's odd when it comes to a lender. And that is very odd. I mean, we love to, as a culture, whine about or whinge about organizations like lenders, banks, that kind of thing. Calvert, it's going to be difficult for you to hear a bad word about them. And you're going to hear why that is. One thing that we really get into in this interview that I'm preparing you for right now is culture. And I thought when we first got into this conversation that this was going to be about a family and how a family has done business, succession planning, a lot of that stuff. I really was planning to talk about that. We ended up veering off and really talking about culture most of the time. And you'll hear why. Because Dean is very passionate about culture and creating the right culture for his organization, as well as allowing that to seep out of the organization and impact communities, impact clients, customers, impact the people that he's dealing with on a consistent basis. The wrong word is to say it kind of oozes from him because it gives a different connotation. But this just naturally comes out of who Dean is and what Calvert is doing in communities around Canada and the US, because they're fairly large. So I will shut up. I'll let you get into this. Pay attention to that specifically, those two things that I mentioned, how family has figured out how to work together, because that's something that families struggle with no matter how big or small or whether they own businesses or not. And then secondly, what is culture? Because culture is a word that we throw around. It means a lot of things to a lot of different people. Specifically, pay attention to how Dean talks about culture in Calvert. Enjoy. All right, welcome to another podcast here, Traits Podcast. I'm joined by Dean Koeller. Dean, you've got an interesting story. Even in just the last few minutes as we've been talking, I've been learning a little bit more, far more than what I can gather from talking to some other people or looking at stats on your website or LinkedIn or whatever else that I've tried to do some research on. And something that stands out is that a lot of businesses are family run. A lot of businesses have some unique dynamics when it comes to family, and everyone handles it a little bit differently. Everyone has different struggles with that. Now, what I think I'll do is maybe first introduce your company, brag on it a little bit. I'd like to have Calvert really stand out here, and then I'll get into that question about family, because I think that's something we can spend a little bit of time on. So yeah, talk about some prizes and awards and some growth in the last 10 years here.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate having this opportunity to be on the podcast and share our story and kind of the trajectory of where we've been. What I love about, talking about our family business or other family businesses, like everyone's story is unique, but there are some commonalities that I think are important for every business owner and family business to really think about. And, how can we leverage and learn from each other? So my father started Calvert Home Mortgage in 1975. His intention is how do I create meaningful relationships and help people in a time where they're purchasing a house and making a financial decision to give them the best opportunity for success at every moment. And we've really continued that trajectory and that desire to want to personally help everybody that we work with. We're one of the few mortgage lenders in Canada that has an in-house appraisal team, an in-house legal team, so we can go from a mortgage application to a funding of a mortgage in 24 hours. And that really gives us an opportunity to quickly solve problems and focus on where there's a friction between what the banks are willing to offer and where we're able to provide a unique service. I joined the business in 1997. After getting a university degree in finance and entrepreneurism. It's a great opportunity to join my father on his venture. And then in 2001, my brother joined the business. And this is where things started to get tricky for us. My brother and I really didn't have a way of differentiating what each other's value proposition was, how we were going to work with our father, how decisions were going to be made. When you're a sole proprietor, you can be in the shower and have a management meeting, an owner meeting, an executive meeting, and a family meeting all in the same place. But as you extend to having different stakeholders in management groups, in the family group, and in the ownership group, that's where things get a little bit tricky. And that's what we experienced early on in being able to work together as a family. My father had the bright idea of hiring a family psychologist to come in to help us try to figure out this space. The family psychologist interviewed me and my brother and my dad, and after some thought, came back and said, there's just no way you're going to be able to work together as a family. And his recommendation was to break up the family business, go our separate ways. That wasn't the advice we were hoping for or looking for. So we really took some time to go and find the right advisors, the resources, and the support tools that were going to help us to find a way through this. And we were all committed to finding a way through this. And that's when we came across Canada Family Enterprise. And that association really helped us to learn about what we call as a 3-circle model. So you have family as one circle, you have ownership as another circle, and management as another circle. And where there's overlaps, that's where we need to have really thoughtful conversations. If I'm sitting at the dinner table on a Sunday night with the family, and all of a sudden my dad rolls into a performance review, that can be really tricky for my brain to go from having a conversation with my dad and then I'm having a performance review for my boss. Or my brother and I are sitting in the car going to the movies, and all of a sudden we enter an ownership conversation, but we don't have all the owners at the table to have that conversation. So how do we have clear agendas? How do we have clear communication styles in each environment so that we know what types of conversations we're having? So if I'm outside of the office, I'm calling my dad, Dad. If I'm talking to him inside the office, I'm talking to him as Everett. And that just mentally creates a shift in how we're having conversations. And then the next level of that is, when I go home and I have a conversation about a frustrating day with a coworker, which just happens to be my brother or my father, my wife is translating that conversation much differently than it would be if a typical spouse went home and talked about a coworker that was frustrating them. So we had to have really thoughtful conversations as to, how are we not creating difficult conversations between our family when there's so much overlap. So there's really some thoughtful work that we had to do to create a formal structure for having ownership conversations, formal structure for having family conversations, and with the management company as well.
Okay, so I'm just backing up here. Your brother, he has a unique job title. When I was reading about this, what is it, Chief Risk Assessor or something like that?
Chief Risk Officer, yeah.
Officer, that's what it is. Okay, so Chief Risk Officer. Maybe what I'll do is, again, back up a little bit. What did the psychologist say, or what was the kind of the general gist of what the psychologist was saying of why it would not work with you guys?
I would say, the area that they really focused on is that there were very different views as to, how we should work together, how we should identify, where we can add value to the business and how decisions were being made. My father, as a serial entrepreneur, was very clear in his decision-making process and didn't have a clear way to bring his children into that environment, even though he was very motivated to help give us the experience and the opportunities to be able to explore our own strategies for how we wanted to work in the business. But he really wanted each of us to kind of make those decisions independently and not bring us to those transactions. When you look at our characteristics from a traits profile, my brother is less assertive, so he wants to collaborate on every decision. My father is a little bit more assertive, and he likes to just go and make those decisions, and I was in between. So I ended up being the peacemaker from being too conservative and being too aggressive. And then since I took over the title as CEO, now my traits are even stronger push towards growth and building the company. And my brother and my father have kind of pulled back a little bit more and are a little bit more conservative. So we have to have really thoughtful conversations about where everyone's level of comfort is around risk, because, as business owners, there's lots of different risks that you need to take. So you need to be really thoughtful about, how do you peel across the layers and get to the deep-rooted feelings that's driving the behaviors that's going on in your organization.
And even I'm thinking about your dad right now. My assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, is that, and I've seen this with a lot of older business owners, is that their risk profile changes as they age. They think about risk differently. They're willing to take maybe less risk, or and maybe there's some life experience there. Maybe there's some just general natural thinking changes as we age in general. Was that true for your dad, or what do you think led to him being a little bit less risk oriented?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, to your point, when you're young, you have this sense of ambition and growth and opportunity, and almost a little bit of nothing bad can happen to me. Mm-hmm. And I see it right now in my 15-year-old son that, he translates risk very differently than I do. And I can see that kind of coming into, I can see more of my father's, how much do we need to risk compared to not. For next gens that are kind of coming up in their parents' business and in those types of environments, it can be quite daunting to grow up in the shadow of a very successful entrepreneur that's done very well. So you can tend to get either people that pull back and are more reserved and take more care with the decisions they make, or you can get people that are very aggressive and try to grow outside of their parent's shadow. And I would say I did a little bit of both. I, in some areas, was very conservative and wanted to prove to my father that I could make very careful, thoughtful decisions. And in other areas, I wanted to be much more aggressive and find ways for me to explore and challenge myself and to find where my leadership capabilities would be. In 2009 to 2012, there was the U.S. mortgage crisis where, at one point we had 30% of all of our mortgages in our portfolio in arrears or foreclosure. So when you have big events like that, that kind of takes my father into a position of, how much more risk and effort do I want to put in? And am I getting to the stage in my life where I want to take, more time off, enjoy some other hobbies and do other sorts of things? So that event really had an impact on him. And that was kind of the starting point of him starting to move back out of the business. And my brother and I to really step up and move into the business, into taking more of a leadership role and thinking about what the next stage is. So while that was a trigger for my father to pull back, for my brother and I, that was the first real big economic downturn that we had lived through. And there was a sense of confidence that, okay, now we understand, what a bad economic environment would look like. We have some levers and some tools that we can utilize if this ever happened again. So you saw an increase in our level of confidence that gave us the ability to want to step out and be a little bit more of a leader in the organization and start driving the organization.
Yeah, I guess like I was living in Alberta just after, well, right around that time, but 2003 to 6 was absolutely insane in Alberta, even 2007. But things turned around, right, quite quickly, and that must have affected you guys in different ways as well. Go back to your family. So the psychologist tells you guys this isn't going to work, and you found ways to make it work. Part of that, you talked about the kind of those three circles and where they meet. We need to communicate really uniquely. What else really helped make this work? Because you've been working together for quite a while now, over 2 decades. What has worked most? What have you guys found for the three of you has worked best?
Yeah. So number one was a governance structure. So we put together, and this was another unique thing. So, I really felt like we needed to bring out some outside advisors to help bring some accountability to the structure that we needed to create. My father as an entrepreneur is just like, I don't want a board of directors telling me what to do. So we brought in his best friends, college friends, always had been in his camp and been there for him. So we brought those two friends in as advisors of the business. So that gave my dad the comfort that, at a board table, he was going to have his his friends to kind of support the mentoring and the developing of his two children. I feel that, these outside advisors not only brought accountability to me and to my brother, but also to my father. Because if he was going to say, look, we're working on this strategy, he also had to live up to his part of that accountability. So I think that outside governance and accountability really, really helped. So from 2003 to 2006, we had kind of an unofficial board of advisors. Then in 2006, we formalized that to a formal board with 3 family members and 3 non-family members on that board. And then in 2015, when my father retired out of the business and became chair of the board, we brought in a full independent board so that we could have a formal governance structure. I would say that the next piece that really helped in allowing us to be effective as a family was the traits model that we used. So having Concord Consulting come in and help me understand who I am as an individual, what are my preferences, how do I tend to lean, especially when I'm in modes of higher stress and holding other people accountable. How did my brother show up? How did my father show up? And then how do we find ways to leverage our capabilities so that we could do our best work? So I was much more entrepreneurial, thinking about the future. How do we build things? How do we create things? I would put together this, 5-point strategy for where I wanted to grow the business. I'd go to my brother, and then my brother would go, yeah, these are great. But we need to work on the 28-point strategy, not the 5-point strategy. So his high level of detail drove into, we got to figure this out before we take our first step. So for me, I first needed to recognize that when I was taking a 5-point strategy, it was not going to be in enough detail that my brother could really see all the connection points to it. So how do I bring him along earlier, get him to start putting together some of the more detailed operational components of that so that I can continue to operate at 10,000 feet while he's building the operational plan at the ground floor. And then, how do I have the right level of communication with my father so that he's getting the right level of detail, he understands where I'm going. So just understanding our traits really helped us to focus on the stuff that we're really good at and not trying to compete that I need to double down and do a 28-point plan when really that's not where I can do my best work.
It's interesting. I run into this all the time, especially when I'm talking about traits or personality. Personality, by definition, is that which is resistant to change in a person over time. And there are many things that we can change in our lives. We can change our education, our experience, the way we think about problems. We can get coached on things, how we communicate. But in the end, we're going to go back to the ways who we are, will shine through over time. And I like where you're going with this. So you talked about, again, you told this is a bad idea, and you went, let's understand ourselves and each other so that we can communicate, that we can delineate, we can be governed properly, we can have accountability, but specifically, let's get to know ourselves so that we can know how we're going to be reacting to things, and we're prepared beforehand, that we can proactively take action rather than react to situations, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk about, so I'll expand this a little bit. I want to come back to succession planning a little bit, but as you started to get to know yourselves, the three of you use traits a little bit. How has that then spread throughout your organization, and how do you use an assessment to understand who people are and how they will typically behave in certain situations to help with not necessarily hiring, but really communication and connection and culture in your organization?
Yeah, well, I think it really starts with the application process. So how do we profile the right job so we're making sure we're hiring the right individual that fits the traits of that position? And when you hire people that fit the role that the role is designed to do, you don't get stress points, you don't get the friction points, and they're able to do their best work and be effective in that. So hiring the right people for the right roles is absolutely essential. And for us, it's been not only a great retention tool, but we've really been able to help people understand why they're so successful at the things that they enjoy. and I think about this level of there's a mastery component to everyone's job. There's an autonomy level to every job. And then there's a meaning and a purpose level to every job that people do. And I think it's incumbent upon leaders of organizations to find the right levels at the mastery, the purpose, and the autonomy. And when you can put that in line with where your traits are, then I think you have an organization that can successfully build a culture and a purpose and a meaning around itself that can be quite powerful. Waterstone is an organization that does an award for Canada's most admired corporate culture. We've won the award now twice, and we've been in some of the highest percentiles of their performance standards. And having an organization that's committed to creating a certain culture, to creating a certain purpose and a meaning for the employees that come around, I think is really, really important. And there's a lot of myths that I think exist around this next generation that isn't committed to the work. They aren't willing to stick around organizations for very long. But our experience has been when you give people really good meaning and purpose in the work that they do, they are willing to stick around. They do need to know that organizations are willing to invest in them. So we play a high priority in learning and development. And that starts with understanding yourself. And when you understand yourself and then build a learning program and a development program that hones in on your mastery and your strengths as a human being and not always on your weaknesses, I think it can be really demotivating for employees that are just asked to focus on their weaknesses and not see success and mastery in the areas that they're really strong in. And we think about that every time we're building a new project in our organization. Like, how are we getting the high social people on the team that are going to stimulate conversation? How are we getting the high detailed people that are going to think about the smaller pieces in the operation? So you're bringing some diversity to different projects and understanding, here's a skill that you have, and this is why we need you on this project to kind of help us think through and build out successful components of what we're trying to achieve.
So if you were to summarize culture, according to Dean, according to Calvert, what would culture mean for your organization?
Culture goes in at every level of the organization, and it starts with your board down to your executive, to your managers, and your frontline people, and then extends out to all of the employees, partners, and people and clients that you're working with. So when we kind of did this first level of work as an organization, we started with, what do all of our clients think of us, and how do they perceive who we are as an organization? So we did a customer survey, and what came back very clearly in all the language that was being used about us is, you have an organization that really cares about your clients and the end result that you're trying to achieve. So we really recognized our foundation in the culture of the meaning of who we are around that word of care. It's funny, our family got recognized as Signature Family of the Year with the Alberta Business Family Institute. So while we were on stage receiving the award, we had one question from the audience about, how do you get your employees to buy into your values as a family and as a business? And it struck me at that moment that it wasn't a one-way transaction. It was a two-way conversation. So I would say traits helps us to identify the types of people, the types of characteristics, identifying those employees that are servant leaders, that love to create a customer experience, care about our clients. That's kind of the general bar that we're looking for. But once employees are part of the organization, it's about, how do we co-create our values and understand who we are as an organization. Perfect example, I had an employee that personally spent a lot of time, working on animal rights through PETA. And she came to me and said, Dean, I got a challenge. I got a mortgage client that I'm trying to work with on a solution, but she has 60 cats in her house and she's not looking after those cats. So I have a moral dilemma in being able to help this client with the needs that she has when she's not respecting the animal rights that she was currently in. And I said, if this isn't a deal you would do, then it's not a deal I would do. Let's pass on this. We'll get this client serviced by one of our competitors. Our competitor was very happy to take on the client, but that interaction changed how that employee showed up for the rest of her time with us, because she really felt like I was invested in her values, and that made her more invested in our values and what we were looking to achieve as an organization.
So much of my adult life is focused on me feeling, especially early on, how I felt so different than other people for so long, and what helps me feel comfortable with others, what helps me feel at home in a community. I've traveled a lot around the world and have spent less time in Canada. And one thing that struck me, and I've tested it out since like the last 15, 20 years, I've tested it out over and over. And what I found is that when somebody, and I'm going to use the word that you've used over and over and over again here, when somebody feels that their purpose is acknowledged, when they feel like they can be heard, and not only heard, but understood, and not only understood, but they are welcomed when they are understood, rather than shunned or spun away or ignored or whatever that is, that is significant in how we build community and how we feel close to people. And what I believe I'm hearing from you, correct me if I'm wrong, is that people are people. Yes, technology changes. Yes, different generations struggle with different problems, have different strengths, whatever it is. But people are people. And when we can connect with them and listen to them and hear them and actually listen to them and bring that out and allow them to bring it out in what they do and become masters of what they do, then they find a home where they are. And you talked about retention early on. My guess is that it makes a massive difference with retention, but it also makes a massive difference with how much effort and energy somebody can bring to their work. Would you agree, disagree? What would you change about that?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I would use the word belonging. So when people feel like they're a place where they belong, and the clients feel like they belong, and the shareholders feel like they belong, then you've created something that I think has some uniqueness to it and some magic to it. You know, I also talk about our culture being somewhat of an immune system. So there are situations where we might not have recognized a certain personality that we've hired, that they create drama, they gossip about other people. They're doing the things that we feel as a community and as a culture that aren't part of who we are. But what I love is that very quickly other employees start to recognize this employee isn't fitting in, and they're so it's kind of like an antibody that starts to say, you know, maybe this isn't the right fit, and then we start having open conversations. And it surprises to me how quickly people self-realize, I don't belong in this environment because how I behave isn't fitting with how everyone else behaves, and they self-select themselves out of the good culture environment. So it is interesting to see, because, you know, I get lots of criticism to say, well, you know, it's easy to have a culture at 15 people. It's easy to have a culture at 50 people. But as you continue to grow, it's going to get harder and harder. And I'm actually recognizing that as long as I'm showing up, living my culture and values, my executive is living those values, that we're going to continue to build out antibodies that's going to ensure that we can keep that culture alive and continuing to thrive. The other thing that I think is really important that we do every year is we do an organizational health assessment. So we ask 50 questions of all of our employees. We've done the same questions for the last 5 years, sorry. That really helps us to, okay, where are we winning? Are we looking after the wellness of our employees? Is there psychological safety in our company? Where do we need to focus on improvement? You know, the last 4 years as a trend, you know, decision making has kind of been our lowest score that we've had. So as you continue to grow as an organization where it was very easy for, you know, 2 or 3 family members to make all the decisions, that's not scalable. So, you know, how are we continuing to empower our employees, come up with better authority strategies so that we're empowering our employees to make more decisions independently? and not have a structure that kind of sits as tightly as it's been early on when it was very easy to have one or two people make all the decisions in the company.
There are a few places I want to go here. What I'm going to do is actually back up again. Before this interview, you showed me some baseball cards. I'd like you to introduce these baseball cards and just specifically talk about how you utilize them at Calvert.
Yeah. So every employee, when they come to work for us, they get their picture taken. And on the card, it has the year they started. And then on the back, it has their traits profile. Mm-hmm. So on day one, everybody gets a stack of cards with all of the employees in the company. So number one tool is, I'm a new employee. I don't know anybody. How do I get to know who's who in the organization? What role do they play? So you find people in the first couple of days, I got a marketing meeting. You pull out all the marketing employees so that you can have their picture and you can recognize them and associate their names and the roles and how long they've been in the organization. So it's kind of a great onboarding tool to kind of help build that familiarity with each of the employees in the organization. Then when I'm doing one-to-ones with an executive or with managers or with individual employees, and they're coming to me and saying, I'm really frustrated. I don't know how to have conversations with, my brother, the chief risk officer. Okay, let's get his traits profile out. Let's get your traits profile out. Let's talk about, where everybody is at. Where's your assertiveness, your detail orientation, your patience, and your sociability, and why might there be challenges in how you're communicating and how they're receiving information. And just having a level of vulnerability and empathy to the other individuals in the organization and seeing how you show up compared to how other people show up, that really starts to have a conversation to, okay, how could we have that conversation differently? How can we role play it differently and talk about, why someone might need more detail, why someone might need to, I love it, when you get people that are lower on sociability, they love to have the information before the meeting so that they can digest about it, think about it, and come up with their ideas. Where the high sociability people, they're going to walk into the meeting not having read anything and just talk their way through the ideas. So how do you prep every meeting so that everybody comes to the meeting with the tools and the resources they need to get to the best outcome by the end of the meeting? So understanding who's at the table is so important to setting the stage and setting the table to have the right conversations.
One thing that I've come in, or an idea that's been brought forth a lot as I've gotten into traits myself, as I've understood kind of personality assessments or psychometric assessments, has been, how are you going to use this against me in our organization? So you've got this, and how is this going to limit me? How is this going to hurt me in some ways? And I think a lot of people have been burned in the past with, hey, some tool was brought in and all of a sudden they're going, hey, people are seeing me in a different way. The way I hear you using this is, how can we better get to know it? It's the start of a conversation. It's not the be all end all. This is not the baseball card equals all of who this person is. It's a starting tool. So here's a picture. Here's where this is how long they've been at in the organization. This is what they do. And this is a few things about them that you should know. And again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I get the sense that you guys go, okay, now let's get to know you. This is a starting point. Now let's get to know you. Let's hear about what you care about. What are you passionate about? Again, what is your purpose? And how do we help you? How do we help facilitate you living that purpose out in this organization as well? Is it accurate, or would you change anything?
Yeah, and when I think about, how we work with our clients, you can have clients that are coming to us with a 500 Beacon score. They're not bankable. They've gone through some very difficult financial situations. We don't take their credit score as face value as to why we would or wouldn't do business with them. I want to know, what's your story? Why did you end up with bad credit? Did someone in your family member pass away? Did you have a car accident? Like, there are some real life events that do not actually reflect why their credit score is what their credit score is. So it's really important for us to not take 1, 2, 5 data points as a reason why we wouldn't hire someone or do business with someone from a lending environment. So I would say you would see it throughout our process in how we interview is really getting to know the individual, why they show up, what is their purpose, why do they care, what meaning do they bring to what they do and why they do it, what are their career goals and aspirations. So really understanding those capabilities, and then overlaying some characteristic tools that either align and might not align. And how can we help individuals to find their best work? Really great story. So I had a lady that came to me. She finished her accounting designation. She had 3 years of accounting experience, and she wanted to be an accountant. And her creativity was a 7 out of 10. And I was very clear. I said, it's very difficult for accountants to have this level of creativity when the majority of the type of work you're doing is very systematic and consistent over time. And I said, look, I'm willing to take the risk, but there is a likelihood that there might be a different career for you. And over a 3-year period, every one of our one-to-ones was about, she didn't feel like she was living her purpose or doing the right type of work. And I knew it. But over that 3-year period, she gave me 100% in accounting and did amazing work. But I knew that there was a path that was better suited for her. And eventually she went into social work and has done some amazing things outside of the career. I don't know if you've ever seen the cartoon where they're having two executives are having a conversation about whether they're going to invest in someone's personal development. And it's like, well, what if we invest all this money and they leave? And then the other person says, well, what if we don't invest any money and they stay? I'm all about how do we help people develop and do their best work. And if that means they need to leave our organization and go on a different path, I'm happy with that. But I want their time here to be meaningful and purposeful, that we've invested in them as much as we could to get the best out of their work that they're doing and wherever their path might lead them.
Yeah, touching on culture again, Dean. Again, what I'm hearing here is that what starts at the top of your organization in really caring for people, listening to them, helping them feel understood, creating belonging is the word you used for them, that then it integrates and helps employees practice that with each other. But I'm also hearing it helps them practice this with clients and customers. And again, really quickly, personal side, I was talking with my admin person this morning. There was somebody who had a few yellow flags, one of our customers. And with tenants, we've got a fairly long-term relationship with a lot of these tenants. So I want to be careful that we're putting the right people in a building that fits them. It's got to fit both ways. And for me, I use a similar process in that, hey, a couple of yellow flags, few yellow flags, that's okay. What's behind them? So why are they yellow flags? What's going on in their lives? Let's get to know them a little bit more so that we can understand a bit more of the situation and then make a decision. It's not like a generalization, 3 strikes you're out or whatever for no other reason. It's hey, how do we understand where somebody's coming from? And we've had phenomenal tenants that had quite a few yellow flags, and they were just brilliant human beings that fit our building extremely well. And getting to know them, taking that extra little bit of time made a lot of sense. When we talk about belonging, what comes to my mind is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I go, okay, so basic human needs, and then you've got safety and security. And when you get to community and belonging, that's a higher level. When we start to understand who we understand who we are from the community that we're with. And if that helps us feel more belonging, if that helps us get to know ourselves more, we are then free from the need to protect ourselves, and we're free to invest far more into the people that we're around and the people that we're with. Is that something, again, would you agree, disagree? Is there any changes you'd make there?
No, I completely agree that there's a lot of complexity in getting to that. And then there's a lot of risks that I think you have to be thinking about and managing. I had the opportunity to attend Singularity University, which is Silicon Valley. Peter Diamandis, who wrote a book about abundance, created this university to kind of help executives think about what's happening with technology and where things are going. And what really surprised me is on a 10-day executive program, we spent one full morning on psychological safety.
Hmm.
And, the belief is that if you're going to be a tech organization that is growing fast and adapting and really being on the cusp of change, you need to create an environment where it's safe to make mistakes and to learn and grow and to accelerate those mistakes so successfully. So they had a bunch of actors that actually monitored you, recorded how you showed up when someone said, hey, I really messed up and I screwed up this project and we're going to lose $1 million. What are all the physical cues? What's all the words that I use that automatically creates some level of identification that this isn't a safe conversation, and I'm not going to be okay. So I think we need to be as leaders be much more aware of how we show up in our environments, and then how do we not make it safe for people to explore, get curious, make a mistake or two, and kind of giving them a safe playground to be able to operate in. And we gotta have conversations about risk and figuring out what's safe. I had this one presentation that I attended, a family enterprise, where they had a gentleman that goes on ice climbing missions. And even with his children, he would say, hey, kids, we're going to go to the playground today. We're going to do a risk assessment. What do we need to worry about? Well, on the way to the playground, we go by a river. You could fall into a river, and that might be bad. Okay, so how do we walk on the other side of the road? So you do a little bit of a risk assessment. So you do this with employees first and say, hey, I want to give you a lot of flexibility in making this decision. Let's talk about where the safe space is and where does it get risky that we need to have thoughtful conversations. And when you have those ahead of time, you create a safe environment for them to explore and test that environment. I think that's really important. But having psychological safety without accountability creates a really risky environment. And we've seen that go too far in an organization where it's really safe to have your own feelings, have your own perspective, but you also need to own your own behaviors. And when you behave out of line, there's consequences to those actions, and we need to hold people accountable for how they show up in organizations. So I think it's really important to be thinking about both psychological safety and accountability, and you can find a way to balance those two under the umbrella of belonging with some meaning, purpose, mastery, and autonomy. I think you got a really successful ability to create an organization that's going to stand out in today's world.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Dean, this is excellent because, again, culture is a word that's thrown out a lot. I thought we were actually going to talk a little bit more about succession planning and family stuff, which we started with. But this has been a brilliant conversation about culture and what that means to you and Calvert. What again I really appreciate about this is that it hits every single level of the organization as well as clients and customers. They see it, they feel it. I'm going to share one more really quick story before I finish off here, and that is that I've made use of Calvert in the past. I did a flip. This is probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now. It was a while ago, and what really stood out, I don't even remember the name of the person who helped us, but 2 things stood out. One is that they really understood the market. So this was in Calgary. We were in a very specific area. We were in Bonavista. You'd know that well. But we were in a very specific area. And this gentleman knew the area extremely well. He knew his stuff. But secondly, it was that he was willing to get to know us. And that is so different than what I experience with banks and lenders generally. Generally, it's a systematized, structured, this is what we do, this is what we don't do. If the boxes aren't checked, we don't do it. If the boxes are checked, we do. It's very simple most of the time. And Calvert really stood out as different. And I've talked to a lot of other people since then about Calvert, and consistently that's what I hear. I'm from Calgary, but I've constantly heard Calvert just is different. The way they treat people, the way they help people, it's different. It's not a lender taking advantage of situations and maximizing their return. It's a lender who is joining and partnering with people in a unique way to reach both goals. So really quickly, thank you. For myself, I appreciate it. But I hope a couple of the things that you heard in that interview were words that stood out to me. It doesn't matter. You can focus on whatever you want, right? But the words that really stood out to me, one was purpose. Dean used the word purpose so many times, especially in the middle part of that interview. Another word that really stood out to me was belonging. And the reason those stand out to me is because culture is a buzzword. Every organization talks about culture. Every company talks about culture. And that's not necessarily good or bad. I mean, it's good that we focus on it, but I think that what culture is gets lost in translation a lot of the time. That's something that I really appreciated about that almost every single interview I've had with leaders, both the first season and in this season, is that I hear from leaders who truly care about the people around them and are building a community, which for them, culture is part of that. Now, but people have different aspects of culture that they really focus on. For Dean, that the word purpose and the word belonging really stood out to me, specifically because I think it hits me, and purpose has been a big deal for me in understanding who I am and understanding where I fit. I fit best in any situation when I feel I have purpose. Now, everyone's a little bit different with this, but I truly believe that when we build purpose, when we take the time to listen to people's purpose, and then we give them freedom to explore that purpose and encourage them in that purpose and allow them to become masters along with their purpose, that people thrive. Secondly, I talked about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so I don't need to go over that again. But belonging, when think about this for a second for yourself. Where have you felt you truly belong? What are the times in life, and you can talk about business, but you can talk about anything right now. In life, where have you felt the most belonging? Think about what surrounded that. Who was involved? Because if you feel you belong somewhere, there's always a person involved or a group involved. And that's something that Calvert is creating. That's something that Dean's helping create in his business. Something that I do before I interview people, while I interview people, after I interview people, I'm looking. Sometimes you'll see maybe I'm a little bit distracted because I'm researching something really quick. I want to focus on what somebody's saying, but I also want to maybe add a little bit to see if I can ask a better question. And something that came up after the interview is I Googled Calvert again, and what comes up is if you Google Calvert Home Insurance or Home Mortgages, you're going to see a little tagline, 3 words. These are the 3 words. The 3 words are trusted, caring, fast. And you heard, I mean, trusted, yes, that's part of what Calvert's built in the community. And if you talk to lenders or people that know about lending in Alberta or around Canada, Calvert's name is going to come up as a trusted organization. But caring is something that you heard Dean talk about over and over and over and over again. Fast, yes, he talked about fast as well. But really, out of those 3 words, caring came out over and over again, to the point where somebody said, I don't feel with my belief system that I can do a good job of helping this person with their mortgage. And the solution was not, yeah, let's cut them loose. The solution was, you know what, let's support you. And let's find a way to support this person too, to get the right mortgage for this person. So they found another lender, and we're still able to help this end user needing a lending product, right? And I love that. It just came out in everything that Dean was saying, is that this is a part of who he is. As you go away from this, because I'm not going to be a lot longer, as you go away from this and as we end this, that's something that I just want to leave with you. What is belonging, and how does that fit in your organization? How many people feel like they belong? How many people do not feel like they belong? I've got a very small organization, again, 3-4 employees, depending on the time, sometimes 5 employees. But I'm going to admit, it's going to be a lot easier to do this with 3, 4, 5 people than it is with 1 million people, truly. Having said that, I agree completely with Dean said. When Dean said that it starts from the top, and how I treat people, how the leadership team invests in people to help them explore their purpose and feel belonging, to help community in our organization, it filters through the entire organization to the end user, which again ends up helping everyone involved. Thank you for listening. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop a line. If you comment, if you want to, and this would be a big help. If you have time, throw in a review. What stands out? What do you like about this podcast? If there's any criticism, if there's anything that you're like, Mark, please do this differently, because we read emails that are coming in from people who have listened to different episodes. Feel free to let us know. I'm somebody who wants to grow and learn. So if there's something you're like, Mark, listen, if you did this, it would bring up so much more value. Please let us know. We love improving and changing ourselves. Enjoy your week with wherever it finds you.